Well, the new Marvel podcast continues to give us some great information, and following Kevin Feige on the premiere episode, Brad Winderbaum was part of this week's podcast and gave a lot of insight into Marvel animation. Let's break down everything he said about all of Marvel's upcoming animated shows, talk some Eyes of Wakanda, SpiderMan and What If, and of course, XMen 97. There's a lot going on at Marvel Animation, and the podcast really gave us a great update. Now, before we do that, though, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and ring the bell for all the updates. We do daily Marvel and DC videos, and we want to be your place for all the superhero news, but we're going to bring it to you truthfully and transparently, so you are in the know. Well, as many of you know, a couple of weeks ago, Marvel Studios actually launched the official Marvel podcast. Now, in the first episode, Kevin Feige came on and did reveal a lot about what's going on at Marvel Studios. But this week, Marvel Studios head of streaming television and animation, Brad Winderbaum, hopped on the podcast and talked about all the upcoming animated shows. He had a lot to say, and although I think it was carefully chosen and not too revealing, there are some great tidbits about some upcoming projects, including news on the Black Panther spinoff Eyes of Wakanda. So let's start with that. Now, during the interview, Winderbaum actually confirmed, and I quote, "Eyes of Wakanda, more than any other show we're doing in animation, ties directly into the MCU. This is a story about Wakandan history. It's produced by Ryan Coogler and directed by Todd Harris, who is one of our longtime storyboard artists who I first met when he designed the Hulk vs. Thor fight in Ragnarok. It's an awesome show, the action is insane, and the storytelling is fantastic. It's both about the history of Wakanda, but also expands into the greater MCU at different time periods. If you're a fan of the movies, I think this show is going to be a real treat." So it sounds like Marvel Studios is pretty excited about Eyes of Wakanda, and it's definitely going to expand the MCU's history into realms we've never seen before, and more importantly, in the time eras we've never explored. So that definitely sounds interesting, and opens a lot of doorways, like into those rumored reports that Iron Fist could be part of the show. Now, then he turns his attention to the upcoming Spider-Man series, which was formerly Spider-Man Freshman Year, but is now known as Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Now, he referred to this show as the Peter Parker in High School series, and gave us some insight into how this is going to work, because honestly, this was not what I was expecting. He said in the interview, quote, "There are twists and turns in that show that are amazing, but the real power is in the ensemble, is the neighborhood." The showrunner is Jeff Trammell, who made a show called Craig of the Creek, which is a kid's cartoon that spent seasons in the connected backyards of this neighborhood and had this whole mythology that grew out of it and characters you grew to care for over the course of the series. He's amped that up in such a major way, playing with characters like not just Peter Parker, Nico Manaro, Lonnie Lincoln, and my personal favorite, Harry Osborn, and the others that flesh out this teenage ensemble. It's really incredible. So, for Spider-Man, it actually sounds like we are getting more of a teenage drama with Spider-Man as one of the characters, but it sounds like a lot of these other supporting characters are going to get a lot of love in the show, and we might be getting, for lack of a better term, somewhat of a 90210 kind of teenage drama show, which incorporates all of these other characters versus sort of a standard Spider-Man series. Not sure how I feel about that. I need to see it, but I love the idea they're taking some risks, and since this isn't part of the MCU, they really have a lot of flexibility. Now, Marvel's very first animated show was What If, and we actually got a first peek at Season 3 courtesy of a few stills, but at this point we don't have any idea when we're going to see the show. However, it does sound like the third season of episodes is set to be the finale for the much-loved series, and even seems to have a definitive ending for the watcher. On the podcast he said, "What if Season 3 feels like the completion of a trilogy? It takes us to places you'd never expect. It goes beyond the first two seasons in the exploration of the multiverse, and it pulls in characters that are very unexpected. It has what I think is an extremely moving and fulfilling culmination for Uatu the Watcher." Now, I don't think Jeffrey Wright's time as the Watcher is done, but I do think this series is going to wrap up with quite the bang. Given what happened in Loki Season 2 and all the multiverse shenanigans leading into Secret Wars, you can see where this show will be awfully important to Marvel and want to have a conclusive storyline to peel from before Marvel heads into the major 2 Avengers events and the soft reboot after Secret Wars. Secret Wars is the big enchilada for Marvel Studios, so you know the pieces they put in place here are going to be super important, and there's no way the What If series and many of those characters don't appear in the Mega Showdown. And this leads us to X-Men 97. Now, I know many of you are pretty excited for Season 2, and he didn't waste any time talking about when the show's going to return and some of those Season 2 plans. He made it pretty clear he's excited for the show's return, and we probably should be too. In the podcast, he said, "We got big plans for the second season. I've already seen all the animatics, and we're well on our way to creating something that hits the heights of the first season. I know the first season is an emotional ride. The ride continues in a very X-Men fashion in the second season." Now, sadly, he didn't give us a premiere date, but we are already hearing the show should return in 2025, probably around the same time the show premiered this year. Season 2 has been in production for a really long time, and we were hearing about them recording the lines, well, more than a year and a half ago. So the fact the animatics are done and are moving through this process means this production is well underway, and we all should be pretty excited for the return of the X-Men. Now, Marvel Animation is going to have its own panel at Comic-Con, and I actually think this is where a lot of big reveals are going to happen. I suspect we're going to get trailers for not only What If Season 3, but probably Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and if we're really lucky, we'll get some peeks at Eyes of Wakanda, as well as the second season of the X-Men. I actually think Marvel Animation is huge for Marvel Studios moving forward. Setting up a whole series of successes, one after another, is exactly what they have to do to sort of establish themselves in an area that DC absolutely dominated for decades, and Marvel seems to finally be making some inroads on. Obviously, any new news, we're going to bring it to you right away, but I am curious, what Marvel animated show are you most excited for in the coming years? And what show do you think we're going to see next? If I'm taking any bets, I think it's going to be What If Season 3.